television, we all know. And we know that a lot of things have changed. If we go back, I have to go back a little to the history of television because I needed to explain what the changes are. And the shortest history of television is this one. We have old television, we have new television, and we have no television. And what I mean is, it was the only screen, then it was the biggest screen, and now it is all screens and all other moving pictures that you can receive on all kinds of screens. And our industry has the tendency to not use the word television for that. It is over the top, it is streaming, it is all kinds of things. I'm coming back later on the effects of these definitions. And we should not forget also that we cannot look at the history of television without mentioning television advertising. And television advertising is maybe the most important and strongest communication we've ever had. But it was also criticized from the beginning. And this is Robert Adler, an American. He invented the remote control. And he himself said, this is the end of television advertising. And he was definitely not the last one who declared television advertising to be dead. And we know it is not. And we also know that the remote control is a very important thing in television viewing. And there are nowadays a lot of people who don't know how to switch the television without the remote control. I'm talking about definitions, and there are definitions in our industry that are getting bigger and bigger, and there are ones that are getting smaller and smaller. And I'll illustrate that with the word digital. Only analog people, like me, know what digital is. And digital is a stretching definition. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And sometimes it means we live in our digital world. So then it's the world. Sometimes it's used as modern. This is new. This is digital. And I call it companies like WPP because a lot of these companies in our industry, if you read their annual report, there is every 3 sentences there is the word digital. And sometimes it is used in a complete different meaning than in other sources. So digital is an elastic definition and is getting bigger and bigger. Sometimes I have examples that are not really digital, I think. But a good example is this morning. Then my newspaper was also digital. Another definition that is television, and television seems to shrink. Because if we use the word television only for linear television, or old-fashioned television, or regular television, then anything that is new becomes no television. And we have the tendency to do that in our industry. Is YouTube television? Yes, of course. No. No. Are you crazy? It's not television, definitely not. Is House of Cards television? Well, we say it's over the top because it's from Netflix. But if you broadcast it every week, one episode, is it then not television? Yes, then it's television. So, we have the tendency to press television back to its origin. I'm coming back on these definitions issue later. I have to go to television measurement. A short history of television measurement. And I have to tell you something, maybe some people know, but in the analog television there was a box, an electronic box, and it was called the oscillator box. And all companies that started audience measurement, television audience measurement, was using this oscillator box to measure the channel. And more technical people in the audience would say, no, Leendert, it's not exactly the oscillator. But okay, you could say that the oscillator box was the operating system of the analog television. So after some years, we all found out that there became analog televisions with a compressed oscillator box, or without an oscillator box, or the oscillator box was changed. So we couldn't measure anymore. We have found solutions for that. We is our industry. I will not mention any brands or any methods. And there are two big techniques that are used now. That is audio matching, nowadays called fingerprinting, and encoding. Encoding is very simple, put a code in. Audio matching, in the past I had a problem to explain what it was for an audience. Now it's very simple. Shazam. You know what Shazam is? Then you know what audio matching is. Encoding, I could also call cookie and tag a kind of coding. Site-centric measurement is now indispensable. We need it badly. And what are we going to do now? A lot of our companies are trying to measure the operating systems of mobile devices. I think, in my opinion, that is a dead end. Because nobody believes that iOS 9 is the last one. No one believes that Android Marshmallow, is it? Is that the last one? I don't think it's the last one. So it will cause problems. And most important, of course, in the history of television measurement, is we have the single source only time panel. I'm going into some very simple pros and cons of audio matching and encoding. Audio matching is the only independent technology. We don't need cooperation of any of the operators. And watermarking, encoding, is the only direct measurement of content. Put a code in. It's time that we have a look at, oh yes, I forgot. If you combine the two, you have a very solid system. If you code the big content, the most important content, and you use audio matching to measure the rest, then you're quite sure that you can cover everything. So let's have a look at the future. And what I mean with the future is new definitions and new measurements. I've shown that the word television and the word digital is the one is stretching, the one is shrinking. We need new definitions. And let's keep it very simple. We have video, we have audio, and we have text. So we are going to measure viewing, listening, and reading. And of course, in viewing is also audio. And in reading there is also stills and other things. But I think, let's keep it simple. We're measuring one of those three things. And then we don't need a discussion about where television ends and over the top is starting. There's a complication in this very simple building. And it is, we want to know the way we transport or distribute the content to the consumer. Why do we want to know? And I'm a bit confronting now. I think we want to know because the second one on the list, the third one on the list, the new digital individual online, consumer action is required, especially through the internet, we want to identify that. And why do we want to identify that? Because it's new. I think in 5 or 10 years' time, our television sets and the screens in the house are capable of using to watch anything. Linear, non-linear, over the top. And then I can't imagine that advertisers still want to know through what way this content has come to a screen. So, question mark, why do we want to know? The second complication is that we want to know on what screen the content is consumed, is watched. And here I think it's the same issue. We don't know, but we think that if I watch a commercial on a screen like that, on 30 centimeters of my eyeballs, that it has a different impact than I watch a commercial on a distance of 2.5 meters on a huge screen. We didn't do any research on that, but we think there is a difference. And of course, there will be providers of content, of video content, that concentrate on small screens. And they will use the kind of content that fits with small screens. But at the end, I think, why do we want to know? Our house of definition is now ready. We have complication A and complication B, but we don't know, I don't know, whether it is necessary. A good question would be, where is the internet in our new house of definitions? The internet is nowhere and everywhere. We can't use it in our house of definitions. It's taking care of transport of all kind of content. It is website, it is app, it is streaming, it is downloading, it is reading, listening, viewing, it is search. But it is measurable. So it's useful to measure it. Let's have a look at measuring viewing video. What you see here is a very short summary of the request for proposal for most television audience measurement silos nowadays and in the future. It is total viewing on all devices at any moment from all sources. I call it an intriguing and brave concept. Is it possible to measure that in one measurement source? No. With individual profiling? Don't think so. With reach and frequency? I don't think so. With a clear definition of what is 100%? We don't know. It is a kind of question, please measure the ocean. Without any specific saying that you want to measure the temperature or the depth of certain parts of the ocean. So I think it will be wise, and this is what we are going to see happening already, that there is a B, that is total viewing of content that was originally served to the public by broadcasters. That's a bit small. That sounds like a silo. Maybe broadcasters and other members of our measuring service, that's also a bit like a silo. But we could include HBO, Netflix and YouTube type of stations. Is this strange? No. I'll give you an example. There was a press release of the German AGF, who is responsible as a JIC for the television audience measurement in Germany. And in that press release it was announced that they're going to include YouTube in their measurement. And that is not the most important one. The most important one was that they are going to use not only the holy 10 panel, but also 2 other panels that are available in the German industry. So they are going to combine data and they are going to extend their measurement to YouTube and probably also Netflix and other things. That's good. But as you can see, it needs taking decisions in a market. And then we have C, all other streaming, all other apps, all other things. And the question is, all? What thresholds? Who is interested in this? What you can see now is that this is the design of television, or video measurement of the future. And you see that we need in every industry people that take decisions. The age of the single source holy 10 panel is over. Digital brings audience research worlds together. We are going, and I heard it this morning already, announcing we are going to multiple use of data sources. And let's have a look first, because I'm standing here for television and video. What are the video measurement tools of the future? And let's be honest and clear about it. Last year, Barb and also the Dutch JIC announced that in 2014, 85% of viewing has been linear and including measurable time shift viewing. Maybe that is going down. That is going down. I'm not going to tell you fairy tales. That's going down. But with 60 to 85% of being watched linear or close to linear or measurable time shift viewing, we badly need the 10 panels for the next 5 or 10 years. But we need measurement techniques that are independent of operating systems. So audio matching and watermarking. I'm very afraid of the operating system's measurement of smartphones and tablets. We need site-centric, and we need a lot of new knowledgeable people in the fusion and data merging techniques, because we are going to put an awful lot of data sources together. And I like to make the sidestep to the radio meter. I'm an advocate of the personal meter. And I don't mean any brand of personal meter, I mean the general personal meter. In those countries, and there are only a few countries in the world that are using a radio meter, the Scandinavian countries, and if I take Iceland into Scandinavia, then also that is the same area, Canada and Switzerland, and maybe I forget 1 or 2 countries, but these are the countries that really use the personal meter for a currency. It is very easy. In principle, it measures all content with audio on a personal level. And if you use it for radio, it's very easy to extend it for also the big television stations or smaller television stations. It gives you an extra data source. It measures also total video with audio on whatever platform, but not directly with an identification of the platform. I know. But with the technique of watermarking, with coding content, platform could be identified. If you put a code in the content that is going to send or going to grab through an iOS app, then you know that it is there. And also with the experience of audio matching we have in some of these countries, platform can be estimated. So that is one of the examples I give for the future of that multiple data sources usage. So, will the future be this? all the audience measurement tools together and the online data as the central data source. Don't forget that. The cocktail of data sources. It means enormous progress, but also it gives a lot of issues in merging and combining and adding up all these data. And I have two issues there, and I call them yin and yang, because the one cannot be understood without the other. And the yin one is the devil is in the detail. We can merge and fuse everything, but we have to have a closer look where the presence in the room is the same as within earshot of the television, or download it. We have to realize that TV planning and buying is now based on different data than programmatic buying data is. Is that a problem? We know already, we have experience in some countries that radio quarter-hour data do not really mix with radio meter data. So there are some devils in the detail. We need clear definitions to solve that, and we need open discussions about all these things. What's the other side? Oh, sorry, these are the details. Even if you make them Dolby 3D digital, they are not all the same. And the other one is rough is enough. There is no advertiser or media agency who is booking one commercial or buying one pre-roll. We don't need to find the last viewer. We don't need to see everything. We have to make very clear to ourselves what is needed. What is needed for the station's strategy, or what is needed for the advertiser's strategy. So, and one of these points is, how important is the size of the screen for ad effectiveness? What do we know of ad effect on smaller and bigger screens? Because if we really think that it is different, then we need to measure the small screens separately. But if we are not sure about it, or if we know that there is no difference, why should we do? Good overview is better than unreliable granularity. So, I'm finishing. Summing up. We need data sources that can be combined to show the total picture. We need measurement tools that are independent of operating systems. We have to follow the content on whatever platform. Is platform really important? Kill the devils in the detail by clear and transparent definitions, and rough is enough. Gracias por ver televisión convencional.
Thank you. I'm going to apologise for a slightly croaky voice this morning. I hope I can make it through the presentation. I think it's always really interesting to hear the translation of your bio. I found out all sorts of new things about myself. Okay, so I'm here to talk about readership research, and I have to apologise first of all that I'm going to focus on newspapers, not magazines. That's because that's where I came from. I'm a newspaper girl. But a lot of what I'm going to say applies to magazines just as well. So, what's happening in readership research requires us to look really at three questions. What's happening in publishing? What does this mean for audience measurement? And where are we with readership research? So I'm going to deal with those one by one. So first of all, is our publishing brands falling off a cliff? Or the end of a road? No, I don't think they are. And even WPP's esteemed leader, Sir Martin Sorrell, thinks the same. He's recently been talking quite a lot about traditional media and traditional measurement coming back into the forefront, I guess you'd say. and he spoke at the recent Print and Digital Research Forum on this, and he's particularly keen on the idea that we measure not just exposure to published brands, but also engagement with them. And this is something that is a particular beef of his. I'm not going to be talking about that, but this just serves to say that I don't think traditional print brands, publisher brands, are dead. In fact, we're starting to see signs in the UK of not a resurgence of newspapers, but a bottoming out of the decline. In October, sales of newspaper brands in the UK were only 0.5% down on the previous year, which is quite something when they have been declining at sometimes double-digit figures. So there's a feeling that things are bottoming out. And one of the reasons for that, and one of the interesting things, is that it has been a very good time for print journalism. And now this chart goes back years in terms of what print journalism can do, but there are some quite recent things here. And I think newspaper journalism gets a lot of stick, particularly at the down market end. Newspapers were actually born in 59 BC, when Acta Diana was published in Rome. Since then, I think there's ample evidence about the significant role they play in our societies generally, and as a pillar of democracy in particular. So these are all stories, the Edward Snowden, WikiLeaks, Watergate, thalidomide, not so sure about the Bayer story, but these are all stories that we might not have heard about were it not for newspapers. And newspapers have the space and a longer attention span to explore complex issues like this. And we mustn't forget either that in some parts of the world, newspapers are a growing medium. Particularly in China, India, and parts of Africa, as literacy rises and as multiple language newspapers are published, we are seeing increases in readership. This is data from the LMVR World Press Trends, and there are some jolly big numbers here. 2.7 billion print newspaper readers in the world, 770 million reading on desktop digital platforms, and in the UK, 83% of UK adults read newspapers on one or more platforms, which is a pretty significant figure. But that's obviously it's not true everywhere that things are growing. A lot of the developed world things are declining in the print world, but increasing in the digital world. And this is what technology now enables us to do with print brands. So you can subscribe to it, often with benefits, money off things, clubs. In the UK, you can also partner it. The Guardian has a membership scheme. You can pay an annual sum and become a partner of the Guardian, and that gets you into all sorts of special events. You can Facebook it, you can follow it on Twitter or Instagram, you can pin it, you can listen to it, you can visit its website or a mobile website, and you can actually read a paper version. And a lot of this has happened really since I started measuring print. And what's very interesting is that the early transition of content to new platforms, particularly in the UK, but I think this is probably true everywhere, was all about speed. It was all about getting you access to content much more quickly. And we were very good at providing regular updates for readers online. But this increases the cost of production. And nobody ever thought that, that you have to get up TV researchers to do stuff with. Thank you. And nobody really thought about factoring that additional cost of production into the business models. They thought that all you had to do was just transfer the content online and not worry about how much it was costing you to collect it. So it has had a dramatic impact on the business models. We were also pretty bad at creating specific content for new platforms. There was a lot of fear of cannibalization in the beginning, that newspapers did not want to put content online because they worried that people wouldn't read the newspapers. So we simply shipped print content to new platforms and didn't really think about whether a new environment would need a new way of selecting and displaying content. We have actually got a lot better, particularly since apps came along, where we can see the value of doing something different in an app. But we're still largely seeing the same content on all platforms. And I think, just from a personal point of view, I think we're missing an awful lot of opportunity. Newspapers have fantastic archives, and they also have stories that need updating, stories that need revisiting, and they now have the space to do that. And we probably need to use that massive space more creatively. Branding across platforms is pretty good, and many newspapers have done a very good job of repositioning themselves as global publishers on the back of their digital offers and expanding reach at the same time. Some others, and here I think particularly of the Daily Mail in the UK, have done a very good job of creating a totally new branding for their online sites. So the Daily Mail newspaper is, as you may know, quite conservative, judgmental. I'm not biased at all, and very, very powerful. Its website is completely different. Its website is a gossip site. It has something called the sidebar of shame, which has terrible pictures of celebrities looking ugly and fat. But it's all celeb stuff. There's no news at all, there's no political opinion. So they've done a very good job of turning that into a leading global website, but it doesn't carry the same brand values as the main newspaper. And they have done, therefore, quite well out of that. Their digital revenue is growing. But in many cases, what publishers are doing online and on apps is not having a significant impact on their revenues, and that's the problem. One thing I find particularly interesting, when I started out in newspapers, for a quality newspaper, about 70-80% of revenue came from advertising. And that's been true for quite a long time. It's slipped slightly, but we're now in a situation, this is globally, where circulation revenue is higher than advertising revenue. That's how far advertising revenue is declining. The print ad revenue in 2014 was $77 billion around the world. So it's no small beer, but it was down 5% on 2013. That's the printed ad revenue. Digital ad revenue is obviously dwarfed by that, and it's only $9.5 billion. But perhaps surprisingly, it was only 9% up year on year. What has grown hugely is that small little black segment of the pie called digital circulation. So it's $2.5 billion now, and was up 45% on the previous year. And this includes all payments for digital content, whether it's subscription, online paywalls, or ads. But that tiny little chunk, even though it's growing fast, doesn't nearly make up for the steady loss of print revenue. It would be the subject of a whole other presentation to talk about how publishers are tackling that. But let's just think about what all of this new technology and all of these new access points mean for audience measurement. And first I'm going to go back to, that's something I think I might have presented here 2 years ago, and it echoes what Leendert was saying, that the task now across all media is, the broad principle is that we want media measurement for all content across all platforms and all devices, no matter how small. And that's one of the big challenges that certainly in some media, the access via some devices is still tiny, but we're expected to measure it. So we have two ways of doing this, really. We can extend existing currencies to measure new devices, and we can expand currencies by linking multiple data sets. So this graphic is all about TV. For print, this will mean linking readership data with passive measurement data, print websites, apps, and so on. And I'm not going to go into this too much, but these are essentially the passive measurement options we have for print and for all media. We firmly believe that you need to link census data and panel data, and now that seems to be the norm. The question then is whether you use cookies or meters. I'm not going to go into this in any detail, but I'm happy to answer questions about it later. But there are different ways of doing passive measurement. So that's the broad principle for all media measurement online. So where are we with readership research? This is where I'm going to get a bit technical. So what I looked at recently is what's changed and what hasn't changed. What hasn't changed are the basics of measuring readership. So recency is a basis for average issue readership. I think the term AIR is rapidly disappearing because it's meaningless in a digital world. There is no such thing as an issue. So we're more likely now to talk about daily readership, weekly readership, than we are to talk about average issue readership. But the recency as a basis for that calculation is still very much the common principle, and that you have a screening filter or hurdle before you get to the recency questions. So that hasn't changed. And also what hasn't changed is the fear, uncertainty and doubt. What we're increasingly seeing is RFPs for readership surveys that really haven't decided how they want to measure everything and what they will measure and how they will link things together. So I think, we're also seeing, in the same way that we have for some TV currencies, we're also seeing things like cancellation of tenders. When nobody can come up with a desired answer, then we just cancel the tender and start again. And that's happening more and more frequently. So I think we're in that period where nobody quite knows what to do. Everybody's waiting for someone to come up with and deliver the ideal solution, and they'll all go, that was what we wanted all along. We're not quite there yet. But the other thing that's changed, or it has changed rather than has not changed, is the language. So we don't talk about print media, although I have repeatedly, I know. It's very hard to lose old habits. We talk about published media. We don't talk about newspapers, we talk about news brands. We don't talk about titles or publications, we talk about brands. We don't talk about surveys, we talk about measurement systems, because that sounds more technical. Interestingly, we started talking about readers again. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Worldwide Readership Research Symposium, which I've been going for a number of years, changed its name 5 years ago, something like that, to the Print and Digital Research Forum. I didn't really make much sense to me at the time because we're still talking about readers. Whatever you're reading on, you're reading. So why is it still not readership? But we're now using the term reader, but applying it to different platforms. The other thing that's changed, and increasingly changing, is data collection. More mixed mode methodologies, partly to save money. So if you can have a kind of core of high quality, robust sampling, and then link that to access panel data, for example, and partly to address response rate issues. We're also seeing an increasing move to online data collection, albeit with robust recruitment, offline recruitment. But the online data collection allows you to do things much more quickly. It also allows you to, it gives you a pathway to do passive measurement. And now that we're much more budget conscious, particularly in areas where print circulations are falling rapidly, we have come up with some ways of stretching the budget through, for example, modelling. So many regional readership surveys are only conducted every 3 years, and data is modelled in the gaps by calibrating to circulation data. We're also seeing some panelisation, so re-interviewing past NRS respondents, for example, after a fifth period. And going back to our cross-platform measurement model, currency extension. I did a kind of audit of all Kantar readership surveys a few years ago, and this is what I came up with. And it's a bit of a kind of continuum. So the ones on the left were things that, surveys that either didn't even acknowledge that there was digital content or asked about it in a very small way. I'm happy to say that nobody's doing that anymore. They are now incorporating in questionnaires quite detailed questions about digital access, but increasingly moving to what we call the brand first approach, which is where you start with the brand and access to the brand, and then drill down into how and which platforms and devices are being used to access that brand. So here's an example. This is from the new Canadian Readership Survey. This is a combination of a newspaper readership survey, which is called NADBank, and a magazine readership survey, which is called PMB. And the two of them have now been linked, and the new industry body is called Vividata. I have no idea why. But this has just been released, the first wave of data from this survey. It's a very detailed question, and I think it's as close as you can get in a survey to treating all platforms equally. But it also places huge stress on the length of the questionnaire. So, although most markets are moving in that direction, there is a limit to what they can accommodate in traditional questionnaires. Not just because of the length, but because the world is getting so complex and it's so difficult sometimes to actually know what you're looking at, a website or an app or a PDF. So it's becoming almost impossible to answer a recall question. So for those reasons, the length of the questionnaire and the complexity of using recall to collect all this data, there has to come a point when that recall data is replaced with passive measurement as the only reliable way forward. So this is a potential new readership model. It has a question mark against it because nobody's actually delivering this yet. But it looks at, on the left-hand side, census measurement. So you tag your print websites, your mobile sites and apps. You have a single source panel that's collecting, preferably on the back of an online survey, that is collecting user data from the panel passively. And that creates a digital currency, which is then fused with the NRS currency, the traditional currency. And now what's interesting about this is that everything on the left-hand side can be done for all media. So it can be something that the technology, the technique, the cookies, everything can be done for video, radio, audio, text. So this is beginning to look like an area where multiple currencies can combine and collaborate to do the digital measurement and then link that digital measurement to their own individual currencies. That's something that we're in active discussions with in 2 markets. So I hope that next time I come I'll be able to say that one of them is up and running. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm afraid my voice is even more broken, Jennie. Don't be scared, it's not Barry White, it's just me. So, I'm probably going to take a slightly different perspective, because of course, we have, on the panel we have a lot of people with a lot of experiences. I'm running a business which has the particularity to talk on an almost equal basis to advertisers and to media. So, and it's very enriching to have this combination of perspective to try to guess where the audience measurement is going. So that's a very basic statement to start with. Of course, the media are changing. I'm not going to give you more examples of trends in media consumption, etc. But I would like to highlight 2 things that may be difficult to combine or to manage together. Starting by inviting the person we never think really about in conferences, the respondent. Because we are surveying in a way or in another, or we are measuring, probably in the world, hundreds of thousands, or if not millions of people to get audience measures of all sorts. And coming back from a research background, I can tell you that less and less they can remember. And of course, the media fragmentation and the media abundance is something they cannot tell us about more than a human being can do. And not only they have physical limits, or let's say neurologic limits, but they are, of course, less and less willing to participate. So it's not only a limit brought by the abundance and the fragmentation of media or topics we want to measure, it's also an attitude. In many countries, it's getting more and more difficult, and that's not only for measurement, it's getting more and more difficult to research people. course, at the same time, and when we talk to advertisers, they want the way the media is traded to change and to change fast. It's very striking when you talk to them, they don't care about the audience of the media. They care about the audience of their campaign. So it's a totally different paradigm. It's true that historically we had to go through the audience of the media to estimate the audience of a campaign, but the internet and the digital component of their investment has given them the habit to talk about the audience of the campaign right now. And they expect to be able to buy in a similar way audiences of campaigns across all platforms, which of course, and we are also involved in the media planning software component of the industry, requires all the players to find new norms, new definitions, new combinations of data streams. If we want to solve all this, so a more demanding end user, so the advertiser, and a more demanding respondent, we probably have to change the way we measure in a certain number of ways across the different media, with probably different weights to the changes. So we try to summarize this in a very simple rule, the 5 M's. Meters, mobile, mixed methods, models, and strong management. Let's go through this. So, meters, I think we need to go to the next generation of meters, because for 2 reasons. First, you have some countries in the world which are very important for media measurement. You cannot really enter. It's banned. You cannot enter very easily a house in some countries in the Middle East. Or they are very far. Or it would be too costly to enter these rooms. So we need also to find a lighter version of the metering system. So something which would be self-installed according to a simple procedure. Of course, we cannot ask the respondent to become engineer. Minimal maintenance, if any. Respondent friendly. So that's a new challenge we have. Also, in some major markets, because the fragmentation of media needs probably the expansion of samples, etc., and you end up having bigger and bigger panels to measure a bigger part of the long tail, and that needs to be addressed in a way or in another. So, we believe in a software-based approach that will be executed, and we will agree to disagree with Leendert, on mobile devices. Passive, of course, the more you ask things to people, the more difficult it gets. So if they can just forget about it to a certain way, it's better. And low cost per panelist, because the sample tends to become a bit bigger. Also low cost because, the traditional duration of a contract for measurement is a couple of years, 5, 6, 7. Who knows how the media will really look like in 5, 6, 7 years. So maybe in 3 years there will be a need to change something. And if you're tied to a very heavy protocol, etc., it cannot change because it's too costly to implement. Then you may miss something. So we try to apply that very modestly. So Ipsos is well known in the area of audience measurement, but also plays the new kids on the blocks for television and electronic measurement. So it's very funny to have both roles. We can be a very classical and educated, and also be a bit more, let's say, daring on some other aspects. So we developed MediaSab as a meter running on mobile devices, because we think it's very close to the people who are carrying out. The compliance, the loyalty of the panelists to the system is really huge, because we worked rapidly and straightforward to the topics of acceptance and non-intrusiveness. The same protocol exists for MediaCell TV. So the idea is to post a tablet, not to send an engineer, and to get it set up by the household people by themselves. The mobile, I know the discussion, and it's a very interesting question on the organic instability of the mobile world. Nevertheless, if we think about the respondents, this is the only piece of device that almost never leaves people. Toilets, bathrooms, bed, everything. And in the measures we do, we see the curve of, let's say, the usage. No, it starts very early. It starts in bed. No. So, if we have such a powerful piece of device next to any respondent, we think it's worth trying to overcome the OS issues, if any, and try to leverage this piece, because it's just there, and it's always on. We do it for different reasons, or for different purposes. Of course, for using MediaCell, so a meter performing audio matching and watermarking, but also to survey people. You know, that's the example of the multimedia audience study, the IP touchpoint. So we just use the mobile as a, say, questionnaire device. We're pinging them from time to time. We ask them to tell us about their media usage and their moods, not for a long period of time, but we just leveraging the omnipresence of the mobile in people's life. Mixed methods. That's very close to what Jennie said. Reaching everyone in some places is difficult, or you don't have one single way to reach people. By the way, it's getting sometimes more complex in mature markets compared to emerging markets, where the mobile phone is actually a very straightforward entry point to people. But we know that not everybody answers to door-to-door interviewers. We know that landlines have a very rare, scarce usage in some places, but we also know that not everybody is online. So, for pieces of research, pieces of measures that actually are aiming at reaching the most possible, the most representative sample, we need to mix the methods, which was not very well accepted some years ago, but we know from operations we run, France, Australia, from Operation Kantar, that it's now becoming sort of standard. So here we have the example of the Australian operation. We recruit Cathy mostly face-to-face a bit, and when we recruit Cathy and face-to-face, you have at the end the allocation of interviews by type of devices. So we let the respondent make the choice. We don't force them into one single mode of data collection. Just also to work on the let's say the user-friendliness of our devices. Models, adding value to the survey. If we don't want to ask everything to everybody, of course, we have to fill the gaps. So this is where the young statisticians in the world are going to make a fortune with us, because there are very few of them, very good ones. We need to fight for them, because we need to hire them and make them work on three things. Data ascription. Data ascription is just you don't ask everything to everybody and you try to fill the gap. Data fusion, you take files from different sources and you merge them into one single data set, which can be used to support trading activities. And data modeling, sometimes you don't even have any information, so you have to model. Example of that, ascription, we had, and personally I had a long struggle with the industry in Australia to try to reduce the product questionnaire. Because it's very important there, so we cover X categories, X being above 30, with a long list of brands, etc. It's just not acceptable to implement such a questionnaire to someone. So actually people are answering only half of it. And then we fill the gap by modeling. Data fusion, example in Latin America, we use Comscore data and survey data on readership to have the total digital plus published we say now, published readership. And data modeling, very classical example also from Emma, from Australia. There are a lot of community newspapers, free papers given to people. It's very impossible to make a sample plan that will cover all of them. It's a very important market from an advertising perspective, so we need to cover this. So there is a model which is a mixture of statistical modeling using circulation, population data, and some surveys. So all this make the future quite difficult. I always consider that media measurement is a relatively low-tech industry. If you look at it, we have, of course, we have meter, we have technologies, but these technologies have been stable over the last couple of years. Probably now, with the surge of digital, they are in the site-centric data. There are more sophisticated approaches, but in theory, all the technologies to know exactly what someone is doing, they are all available. You can sit on your couch, watching your television with a meter, a camera looking at you to see if you're sleeping or not. You will have a finger sensor to see your emotions or a facial coding. Don't forget the Google glasses and maybe an helmet with another camera. All the pieces of technology are existing. The problem is to implement them in a way that will be acceptable to the respondent. And actually, I think the respondent is bringing a lot of the constraints we see now in the industry. So, managing all these changes, the 5 M's, with different weights, different importances given depending on the media and the industry, also under stricter or tighter financial control and constraints, needs a very important management task. Maybe the most important phrase is the last one. It's about skilled people and openness to change. What we see paradoxically now is that the conversation on radical changes, so even just going from face-to-face to a bit of online, etc., is much easier in emerging markets. Because of course, they don't have the legacy, they don't have the system of currency that has stabilized the market around some norms and some habits. So we may see in the future, because some of these technologies are now affordable, surprisingly some less mature markets being at the forefront of research, of measurements, just because they don't have to manage the poison pill of trend breaks, which is also something that has to be taken into account when making a decision. So we believe that the 5M will apply. We believe that the respondent has to be more central to everything we do. It's easy to get fascinated by technologies, etc., but we are, and a lot of us come from research company, so interacting with people, getting information from them. That's always the case. So technology is one thing, getting information is another thing. And that's for us a very important criteria to decide on our investments, developments, and once again, look at some of the emerging markets. My only bet for the future, I can say that in 2, 3, 4 years from now, you may be surprised by some countries in Africa in Southeast Asia by the level of performance that we get in their measurement. Thank you.
Buenos dias, senor and senores. Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much to AIMC to give me this opportunity to share to you the Google and MediaMetrie single source panel. But first, why a single source panel? Of course, in France, as in most of our countries, we are in front of an increase of the device per household. More devices due to smartphone penetration and tablet rise. And this penetration increase provide more and more contact, more and more daily contact with media. We are close to 46 times per day in contact with the media, and especially video, which is strongly increasing. And even if daily viewing time is decreasing in some countries, we have still an increase in France, plus 4 minutes, for example, for the summer period, and plus 2 minutes for the free cumulated 2015 quarter. It's mainly due to the catch-up TV in France, which is increasing in terms of consumption. But in the same time, online usage for computer, smartphone, and tablets are increasing. Smartphone usage is increasing by plus 48%, and especially video on smartphones is strongly increasing. But the same for tablets, because the number of tablet users are multiplied by 2 for this year in comparison with 2013. So it's a strong increase. So multi-screen behaviors is our reality. And our audience measurement in France, as in most of the countries, need to include it. So, the Google and MediaMetrie single source panel is a co-owned panel. It's a co-owned panel based on a co-investment between both companies. I'm sure you will have some question about why, but perhaps for the session. A pilot has been launched in 2012 with success on 500 households, and the official launch has been January 2013. We have now more than 1 year of back data on this panel, and I will share some examples. But before sharing this example, I would like to describe the methodology of the tool. It's a single source panel of 3,400 households, including a panel size increase from January this year of 5 additional households, to give the ability to go deeper in terms of targets, especially for online measurement. So we have recruited this household between January to June to increase the panel size, which is up to 3,500 households. We measure all the individuals in each household for TV, but also for all connected screens as computer, tablet, or mobile. The technology for TV is similar to the MediaMetrie TV currency, which is the French TV audience in France. So we use people meter based on watermarking, including a remote control for individual measurement. It's the same people meters as for MediaMetrie TV currency. Internet is collecting through a Google technology, which is a router. And this router provides a new Wi-Fi connection at home for the household. And the objective of MediaMetrie is to connect all the devices to this router. Computer, tablet, smartphone connected through Wi-Fi. And for computer and tablet, we have a splash screen which gives the ability for each individual to be identified when they decide to surf on internet. So before surfing, they have the Wi-Fi which appear on the screen, and then they connect the first name of each individual. This router works as an in-home proxy, and we measure all the internet connection. So this is the methodology, and the third part of this methodology is that it's important for the French market, the TV result, before delivering to Google and to the French media industry, the TV results are calibrated to the French TV currency to avoid any difference in terms of audience between the single source panel for TV result and between the French TV audience currency. And we measure the difference is under 3 to 4% in terms of audience or ratings. And for the main channel, it's close to 1% in terms of gap. So it's very close. So this is the methodology. How we use the single source panel since the launching. So we use it for MediaMetrie for 3 priorities. First of all, multi-screen behavior measurement. I will share to you some example and the kind of data that we will receive from this panel. The second priority is to reinforce TV plus web campaign and to measure new behaviors in terms of TV web campaign efficiency. And the third priority for us is to increase the TV for-screen measurement, and which will be a key priority because we will provide some new data to the French market by the end of Q1 next year. So the first priority is to understand better about the multi-screen behaviors. So this chart shows to you some examples. As we have all the results for one day in terms of usage of the fourth screen, for example, we are able to quantify individual per individual the daily behaviors. And for one day, this result is coming from June this year. From one day, we have 30% of individuals which are using TV and web at home for the same days. 5.5% which are exclusive web users at home for an average day and not using TV. But 43% are exclusive TV users at home and not using internet for the same day. So always a huge difference between TV consumption and internet. The second question is about multitasking. Multitasking is a key priority for most of the media industry across the world. And with this tool, we are able to measure the multi-screen behavior. Multi-screen means TV and web on whatever the screen in the same time. And it's concerned close to 17.8% exactly, close to 18% of individuals for an average day. Of course, it's difference per age, difference per daytime, difference per program, and also we saw that it's more important for sport than for scripted series or movies, depending to the movies. And in terms of duration, the multi-screen behavior, the multitasking time report is in average 32 minutes per day. So it's not small, it's not too big, but it's 34 minutes in average for multitasking. And it represents for this user 55% of their internet time report for one day, but only 13% of the TV time report. So it's not TV plus internet, but it's more internet plus TV. Just 3 examples, but these 3 examples show how we could use the single source panel to have a better understanding of multi-screen behaviors. The second priority for us is to reinforce the TV plus web campaign measurement. We have 2 kinds of usage for that, for this objective. First of all, to reinforce the methodology of cross-media campaign ratings. And the second priority is to analyze directly coming from the single source panel, and I will share an example for drive-to-web campaign example. But for the first part, we have launched in France last year the cross-campaign rating methodology. And this cross-campaign rating is important for us to to keep the ratio of the currency for TV and the currency for web campaign measurement, in French is Nielsen Digital Ad Ratings, based on MediaMetrie Net Ratings panel. But it's important to have the same result when we analyze the TV and web campaign in terms of incremental reach, to have the same result for TV on one side, the same result for internet campaign on the side. So for that, we use the single source panel not directly, but as a hub to provide the duplication between the two panels. For example, for a TV campaign, the duplication between the TV and the website. And we have the ability to measure the internet incremental reach, target per target, between TV. But we have also a second example of the usage of the single source panel, which is directly to measure directly coming from the single source panel some behaviors, and especially behaviors which are directly linked between TV and web, which is the case of the drive-to-web campaign. The drive-to-web campaign has objective to provide an incremental usage for internet brand, computer, tabs, application, for one brand, for example, and the TV campaign is pushing the internet usage. It's one of the objectives. So we are using directly the single source panel for this kind of usage, and we are able to measure how many people are exposed to the TV campaign, are visiting the website, are visiting the apps of the brand. The results are available by channel, time slot, by genre, to measure the efficiency of the media planning for a campaign. But directly an example will illustrate this usage. It's a car TV example of 82% in terms of reach. It's a TV campaign, a mini TV campaign for a car, around 800 GRP, and the objective of the campaign is to push the frequentation of the website, of the apps, of the brand. And with the tool, we are able to measure the drive-to-web score, which is equal to 24%. It means that for the target concerned by the campaign, 24% of individuals exposed to the TV campaign are visiting the advertiser website or the advertiser brand apps and having not do that before the campaign. So, give the ability to provide the drive-to-web efficiency directly from the single source tool. Of course, these results are able to be measured by channel and also by daytime. And these results split by channel and by daytime show that the highest score in terms of drive-to-web is coming from the channel one and especially from the prime time. Of course, we need to weight this result by the channel campaign pressure, because it's also to ponderate, calibrate this kind of analysis. And with the channel campaign pressure, we are able to identify which is the most efficient time slot for the campaign in terms of channel and in terms of daytime. We are also able to identify the number of contacts, the most efficient to push the drive-to-web and to push the website visit. And for this campaign, the optimum is equal to 5 contacts with a higher drive-to-web scores. And after 5 contacts, the efficiency is not increasing, but it's decreasing, lower. And the last part will be to identify when we are visiting the website. So, most of the visits are occur between 1 to 7 days after the latest contact with the TV campaign. And if we have the visit early, we have around 10% of visit during the next hours, 20% during the 12 hours, and 10% between 12 and 24 hours during the day. So if we add all these visits, 75% are done before the 7 days. after it will be lower. This is just an example. The objective is to increase the number of cases and to create database and benchmark to identify if it's a good success or not for this kind of campaign. But the last priority, and also the main priority for MediaMetrie, is to use a single source panel to help us to develop a 4-screen TV measurement in France. And we plan, as I said, before the end of Q1 next year, to deliver the first result, the step 1 of this TV 4-screen measurement in France to the media industry. This 4-screen measurement is based on 3 parts. First of all, the French TV currency. MediaMetrie, 5,000 households, 12,000 individuals, technology is watermarking, and we measure live plus time shifting plus catch-up. We have a project to include return pass data. The methodology is defined. We are doing some tests with partners, with operators, but we are discussing with several operators to include when we have not only 1 but 3 or 4 operators to be sure to have a full representation of return pass data in France. The second priority, the second part of this TV 4-screen measurement is Internet and video measurement. This Internet and video measurement in France is based on 3 panels. The first panel is for computer, 20,000 individuals using a software meter technology. The second panel is for mobile. It's 10,000 individuals with a mix of logs from carrier operator and meter technology. The third panel is concerning tablets. We have 2,500 individuals using a proxy technology. But all this data are calibrated for TV by site-centric data coming from stat streaming measurement, and site-centric data will provide a calibration for TV on computer, tablets, and mobile. It's very important that the full figures is coming from the site-centric data. And why it's necessary to have a single source panel, I think you imagine, is to create the link between these 2 kinds of tools. Of course, our process is not full single source. We assume that it's a data fusion, but a data fusion using single source as a hub, because we have the real duplication between TV and online behaviors based on the single source panel. The multi-screen panel, the French name is panel multi-écran, but single multi-screen panel. And we will use it to measure the real duplication and to plug this duplication in the data fusion process. So with this kind of methodology, we will be able to provide, by the end of Q1 next year, on 2 kinds of service. The first service, which will be on a monthly basis, it will be the result of audience on 4-screen for TV channel split by demographic structure. So we are able to split the result by demographics. And the second result, also delivered for the same period, will be daily ratings for programs on 4-screen, but not split per demographics. So in step 1, because it's not the end of the project, of course, in every country, every check, we have the objective to have a full delivery of daily delivery on 4-screen, which is the final target. But the step 1 will be this objective, a monthly delivery of TV audience and channel per demographic, and a daily delivery of program ratings on 4-screen, but up to now without demographics. So, muchas gracias, and thank you very much for your attention.